21.4 Temperature. Human body temperature should be between 35.5 and 37.7 degrees Celsius. Temperature affects our bodies and our sporting performances in many ways. Some people adapt to heightened or lowered temperature as a result of their location. Different countries have different climates, from the extremely hot Death Valley in California, USA, which recorded a record 56.7 degrees, to the extremely cold Dome Fuji in Antarctica of -93.2 degrees. Therefore, athletes who compete in these extreme temperatures can experience a lot of negative effects without sufficient training and adaptations. Polar opposite examples of this are the Marathon des Sables in the Sahara Desert and the North Pole Marathon. The Marathon des Sables takes place over 251 kilometers in extremely hot and humid conditions of approximately 50 degrees, whereas the North Pole Marathon takes place over 42.195 kilometers in extremely cold conditions of -30 degrees. Furthermore, when athletes compete in these events, not only do their bodies experience the adaptations to adjust to the temperatures, but they also experience the negative side effects such as hypothermia and hypothermia. Participants in the Marathon des Sables often pass out and require medical attention. Similarly, participants in the North Pole Marathon are at risk of their vital organs shutting down. They are high-risk events as a result of their extreme temperatures, so require monitoring and medics throughout. To prevent the negative effects of these environments, our body tries to maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis is maintaining a balance between heat input and heat output. This means the maintenance of a constant internal temperature of the body. An example of how the body does this is how the body adjusts to heat created as a waste product from food. Your body converts food into energy during exercise to use for muscular respiration. This produces heat as a waste product, which can elevate your internal body temperature. In order to maintain homeostasis, blood vessels near the skin's surface dilate to increase blood flow in that area. This allows the heat to disperse and be lost. Your body will sweat to lose heat too. Moisture gathers on the surface of your skin, which then evaporates, taking heat with it. This is allowed by receptors in thermoregulation. When your internal temperature changes, central receptors in your central nervous system send messages to your hypothalamus. Similarly, your peripheral sensors in your skin send a message to the hypothalamus if they detect change. In response, the hypothalamus sends signals to various organs and systems in your body. They respond with a variety of mechanisms. If your body needs to cool down, these mechanisms include sweating and vasodilation. Your sweat glands release sweat, which cools your skin as it evaporates. This helps lower your internal temperature. The blood vessels under your skin dilate and get wider. This increases blood flow to your skin where it is cooler, away from your warm inner body. This lets your body release heat through heat radiation. If your body needs to warm up, these mechanisms include vasoconstriction and shivering. Vasoconstriction is the blood vessels under your skin constricting and becoming narrower. This decreases blood flow to your skin, retaining heat near the warm inner body. Your body's muscles, organs, and brain produce heat in a variety of ways. For example, muscles can produce heat by shivering. This is called thermogenesis. Hormonal thermogenesis is when your thyroid gland releases hormones to increase your metabolism. This increases the energy your body creates and the amount of heat it produces. So, in addition to these involuntary responses, you can also have voluntary responses. This is things that you can do consciously as an individual to adjust your temperature. These include applying a cold object to your body for conduction or removing layers to lose heat, and applying a warm object for conduction or adding layers to increase heat. So not only will your body make those thermoregulatory responses and those voluntary responses that help you and aid your body in adjusting your temperature, your body will also be affected negatively. So when you exercise in heat, you might also experience lots of negative effects, such as the symptoms of hypothermia. Hypothermia is having a body temperature greatly above normal, and severe hypothermia is considered to be when your body is at 40 degrees Celsius plus. Symptoms of hypothermia include extreme sweating. Sweating not only takes moisture from you, leading to dehydration, another effect, but also crucial salts called electrolytes, which your body needs as part of nutrition. Furthermore, effects also include the previously mentioned dehydration, headache, confusion, muscle cramp, extreme thirst, and at the very severe end of these symptoms are organ failure and potentially even death as a result of that organ failure. These symptoms obviously all have a negative effect on performance. For example, you'll have a higher RPE, a lower power output, a higher heart rate, and a higher breathing rate, meaning your aerobic capacity isn't as good and functionality of the cardiorespiratory system decreases. There will be more of a negative effect on long-distance events due to the higher demand of usage of the respiratory system. This is why the high temperatures in the Marathon des Sables cause so much effect on athletes. An example of this is when a former Olympian from Sicily went 299 kilometres off route in the harsh heats, likely a result of disorientation and confusion from the heat. He was lost for 11 days before being found in Algeria. So, the effects of low temperature now then. In addition to the involuntary responses previously mentioned in thermoregulation, the body will also likely experience hypothermia, not to be confused with hyperthermia. Hypothermia is temperatures below normal body temperature. Acute hypothermia is when it occurs rapidly. Exhaustion is when you're too fatigued. Chronic is gradual. And the severity of hypothermia is dependent on the degree of decrease in temperature. Hypothermia symptoms include high blood pressure as a result of vasoconstriction of blood vessels, rapid breathing, lack of coordination, apathy, and fatigue. Similarly to hypothermia, hypothermia can also cause organ failure and death. During exercise and performance in low temperatures, you increase the likeliness of muscle tears and ligament and tendon damage due to their increased stiffness. You'll also fatigue faster and risk cardiac arrest. This is why so many injuries are picked up in the North Pole Marathon, and even in low-level activity, when you don't warm up beforehand in cold weather, your muscles and tendons become stiff and increase risk of tearing. To test the effect of temperature on the body, we tested participants using a control and someone who underwent pre-cooling. This would show us the effect of temperature on performance. So, at rest we measured heart rate. This lasted 10 minutes. So there would be 10 minutes resting in regular conditions, and that was the control participant. 10 minutes submerged in ice baths was pre-cooling, and there was also a pre-cooling for 10 minutes of an ice vest. So after that 10-minute rest period, we then got participants to exercise. So all participants worked for 10 minutes cycling at a resistance of 70 RPM. We read the heart rate before exercise at rest, like previously mentioned, and then we read it again during exercise. And we also noted their RPE. So the results of this test then. The test results showed that there was not only an impact on resting heart rate, but also in exercise. At rest, we compared performers' heart rates in heat and in normal temperatures. The averages showed that the heat caused a higher resting heart rate, as the normal average was 86.29, where the heat average was 98.57. The results from the test showed also that there was a positive effect on athletes who pre-cooled. I can determine this by looking at their average RPE and their average heart rate when exercising in heat. On the graphs, you can see that the comparative data between athletes with no pre-cooling and athletes who used ice bath pre-cooling. I chose to compare data using the ice bath's results, as the ice bath had more of an impact. The mean heart rate was lower in an ice bath than in an ice vest, where ice bath average was 113.33 and ice vest average was 120.5. I would assume this is due to the participants being completely submerged, causing vasoconstriction in more areas and causing the whole body to cool, as opposed to just the chest area the ice vest covers. So moving back onto the data, the average RPE during exercise with no pre-cooling was 13.71, whereas with pre-cooling in an ice bath, it was 9.33. So you can see that in an ice bath, that RPE is lower. When you compare the two sets of data on RPE in a t-test, you find that the data has a p-value of 0.006, which is less than 0.05, meaning that this is statistically a very significant difference. Therefore, you can conclude that you feel like you're working harder in exercise when you don't use pre-cooling. I also looked at the effects of pre-cooling on heart rate. The mean average heart rate during the exercise with no pre-cooling was 167.71, whereas with pre-cooling it was 113.33, suggesting that pre-cooling means the heart doesn't have to work as hard. Obviously, this shows that there is a difference, but again, we need to look at how statistically different they are. When put into a t-test, the p-value was 0.008, which again, like the RPE test, was less than 0.05, showing that there was a significant difference in heart rate. Overall, this implies that pre-cooling has a positive impact on performance. So, overlooking the results in general from the test, you can come to conclude that at rest, pre-cooling and sitting in that ice bath or having that ice vest, your heart rate lowers, whereas being in hot conditions or humid conditions, your heart rate increases. Then in exercise, similarly, your heart rate will be lower when you use pre-cooling as opposed to if you don't use pre-cooling. So this would imply that heat makes your heart rate increase and the cold makes your heart rate decrease. Furthermore, if you apply this to physical activity and trying to create an advantage for yourself, we go back to the marathon de Sable, perhaps that a way to give yourself an advantage would be pre-cooling before you take place in the event. So that was the effects of temperature on the body, on exercise, and on performance.